Beneath the scorching blaze of New Mexico's sky, a lone rider carved his way across cracked desert earth. Calder Wyatt, weathered and worn, rode in the rhythm of a man who'd stopped rushing long ago. Dust clung to his boots, rising in low swirls like ghosts too tired to haunt. He had been tracking a lost steer since dawn, hoofprints now blurred by wind and time. The silence was sacred, broken only by the creak of his saddle, the sighing wind, and the hawk's distant cry. He liked it that way, silent, predictable. But then it came, barely a sound, a breath, not quite a scream, not yet a whisper, just a tremor in the air. Calder froze, head tilted, pulse slowed. Again, a sound, sharper, desperate. He dismounted without thinking, tying his mare to a skeletal tree. Rifle slung across his back, he pushed through brittle junipers and sun-baked boulders. And there, in a hollowed-out clearing, ringed with dying cottonwoods, he saw her. She hung by the wrists from an old oak, arms stretched high, legs sagging, skin darkened by sun and filth. Her hair, long and tangled, was streaked with blood and sweat. Her lips were cracked, chest rising in jagged, broken gasps. She wasn't dead. Not yet. Above her, a crude wooden sign was nailed into the bark. The words screamed in red paint, angry, rushed, thick like blood. "White man don't forgive." Calder staggered back, bile rising. His hand gripped the hilt of his knife as he scanned the hills, but saw no movement, no voices. Just the wind brushing through dead leaves like the rustle of warnings. "What did they do to you?" he muttered, voice rough. Her head drooped, limp. Rope burns carved raw rings into her wrists. He swallowed, moved closer. "You hear me, girl?" No answer. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, softer now. He could see her face clearly, young, maybe 18. Strong jaw, hollow cheeks, a smear of dried blood on her chin. The rope binding her was twisted mesquite, rough and cruel. Whoever left her meant for her to suffer. He drew his knife, hands shaking. That sign shouted things he'd never said, sins he didn't commit. And still, guilt gnawed at him. Then she groaned, and it undid him. "They were wrong," he whispered. "All of them." He sliced the rope in one clean motion. She fell. But he caught her, barely. Her body felt light, almost boneless, burning with fever. Her eyes opened for a flicker, dark, unfocused, terrified. Calder lowered her gently to the dirt. He poured water onto a cloth from his canteen and dabbed it to her lips. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe, for now." She didn't answer, but her hand, weak and trembling, gripped the fabric of his sleeve. He glanced again at the sign, then back to her. He took off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Got a name?" he asked gently. Still no reply. "All right then, we'll find one for you." With effort, he lifted her into his arms, not like a burden, but like something sacred. "You're with me now," he said. And Calder Wyatt stepped back into the sun-baked wild, carrying a girl abandoned to die, and a truth too heavy to bury. By the time his ranch appeared on the horizon, a lonely outpost clutching the edge of the desert, the sky had begun to bruise with evening. One crooked windmill turned lazily in the breeze. The barn sagged like a drunk mourning something it forgot. The house was simple, one room, patched roof, and a loft. It stood stubborn and honest, just like Calder. He carried the girl inside, careful not to jar her. Fevered, her head pressed against his chest, whispering breaths like paper rustling on stone. He laid her on the cot, removed the coat gently, and lit the lantern. Her eyes opened, dark, distant, but alert. He poured water into a basin, then knelt. Her legs were bruised and scraped, one ankle swollen, wrists ringed by red rope burns. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, the words floating more for him than her. "Just cleaning up a bit." He soaked a cloth, wrung it out, then took her foot, slowly, reverently, and lowered it into the warm basin. She flinched. He paused, waited. When she didn't pull away, he began. He cleaned the dirt and blood from her skin with the care of a priest performing sacrament. The water turned red and brown. Still, he worked, in silence, avoiding her gaze. though he could feel it, like a knife deciding whether to cut. Her lips parted once, but no sound came. "Guess you don't talk much," he murmured. "That's all right. Silence ain't the worst thing." He finished the second foot, dried them, wrapped them in clean cloth, and placed them atop a folded blanket. "You remind me of a river I used to camp by," he said softly. "Dry most the year, looked dead. But after the rains, ran deep. Locals called it Quiet Snake. Don't know why, just quiet." In the lamplight, he studied her. Cheekbones sharp as canyon lines, full lips, cracked but proud, long lashes caked in sand, too young for this much pain, and yet something old sat behind her eyes, something waiting, enduring. "I'll call you Lena," he said, "just for now. You look like an Ayanna, quiet but strong." She blinked once, no protest, no reply, just a breath. Calder reached for a blanket and tucked it around her. "Got some beans if you're hungry. Not much, but better than wind." No response. He grabbed his bedroll and dragged it toward the door. He'd sleep outside, near the barn. It wasn't right, watching a girl who never asked to be saved. Not when his own hands weren't clean. Before leaving, he looked back. Her lips had stopped trembling. The basin sat beside her, water stained with memory. He picked it up and stepped outside, emptying it onto the thirsty earth. Inside, she dreamed. Of fire, and ropes, and horses. Of hands rough yet gentle, washing pain away without a single word. The days that followed passed slowly, like sand in a cracked hourglass. But the silence in the house had shifted. Now it carried weight, meaning. A current neither of them dared name. Lena, as Calder called her, ate when food was placed. Not much, just enough to survive. She moved with caution, eyes sharp, shoulders tense like a caged thing, waiting for the cage to return. She didn't speak, but he caught her watching, when she thought he wasn't. At night, he gave her the cot. He slept in the barn, rifle beside him. He told himself it was to give her space, but truth ran deeper. He was afraid, not of her, but of what she meant. That sign still haunted him. "White man don't forgive." Whoever wrote it meant for her to die slow, and they weren't done yet. 3 mornings later, he saw the boot print, slightly smaller than his, fresh, leading toward the barn. He crouched in the dirt, studying the heel. Military, cavalry. Calder stood, eyes sweeping the ridgeline, nothing but sage and heat. Inside, Lena sat by the window, silent, still. "You see anyone?" he asked. She said nothing, just pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I think we've got company," he muttered. That evening, he sat on the porch, rifle across his knees, lantern low. Coyotes howled in the distance. Stars blinked into life like memories refusing to die. Inside, Lena didn't sleep. He heard her pacing, soft and slow. The next day, around midday, the rider came. Dust swirled behind the chestnut horse. The man atop wore blue and gold, cavalry, rifle holstered, jaw rough with days of travel. Calder stepped off the porch, hand near his belt. The rider reined in, narrowed his eyes. "You Wyatt?" "Depends who's asking." "Lieutenant Graham, Dust Hollow Station. We're tracking a fugitive." He handed Calder a notice, a folded sketch. Calder took it. Already knew what it'd show. An Apache girl, sharp eyes, long hair. Wanted for murder and escape. Dangerous. Reward. $50,000. Calder lifted his eyes slowly. "Can't say I have." The soldier leaned forward, voice measured. "You sure?" Small girl, quiet, might be injured, might be hiding. "We think someone helped her out near Cottonwood Flats." Calder held the paper a beat longer, then folded it, steady. "Ain't seen nothing but jackrabbits and a stubborn old cow." Lieutenant Graham's jaw tightened. "She's not just some runaway, Wyatt. She's part of a savage cell. That sign they left, that was a promise. They mean it." Calder's teeth pressed together. "If I see anything, I'll send word." Graham studied him one last moment, then nodded and turned his horse. "See that you do." Calder watched him ride off until the dust swallowed him whole. Inside, behind the faded curtain, Lena stood. silent, still. She'd heard every word. He stepped in quietly, removed his hat, and leaned it against the doorframe. They came looking, had your picture, said you were wanted. She didn't answer. I told them no. Her eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion flickering in their darkness. I don't know what happened, Lena. Maybe someday you'll tell me. But out here, a man makes choices. I made mine. He turned to the stove, stirring the same beans he'd cooked that morning, just for the motion of it. Behind him, he heard her shift. A breath, maybe. And in that simple motion, trust cracked through the silence like sunlight through canyon rock. Outside, the sun drooped lower. Shadows stretched across the dry yard. The wind, for once, seemed gentle, like even the desert was holding its breath. Calder sat on the porch, sharpening his knife. Slow, rhythmic strokes, steel over stone, like a heartbeat. He focused on the motion, not the edge. If he could keep moving, maybe the memories would hold their place. Then, he paused. A sound. Crunch of gravel. Not a horse. Not a coyote. Footsteps. Human. He looked up. It was Lena. For the first time since he'd carried her from that cursed tree, she had walked out on her own. Bare feet tested the earth, as if asking whether it still belonged to her. She wore the woven blanket he'd folded at the cot, now trailing from her shoulders like armor. You can call me Lena, she whispered. Calder gave the smallest nod, voice, gravel, and wind. All right then. Lena it is. They sat like that until the sun dipped behind the ridge. The firebird faded in shadow, but its shape and what it meant remained. That night, the wind whispered through the rafters like old spirits learning their names again. Calder sat by the fire, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled, stirring a pot of beans. Lena stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself, watching the night settle over desert bones. The silence no longer pressed on them. It breathed with them. Then she turned, suddenly. You want the truth? She asked. Calder looked up, spoon frozen midair. He nodded. Once. No pressure. She walked slowly to the table. Saturday. Her voice when it came was calm, controlled. My father was a minor chief. Our band, small, peaceful, we traded, even went to their churches. We just wanted to live. He listened. Last winter, she said, a white woman was found dead near our trails, throat cut. Her husband said it was us, but it wasn't. He killed her. Everyone knew. But they blamed us. Her fingers dug into the table edge. Soldiers came, ranchers too, townmen with rifles and anger. They said it was justice. She looked him dead in the eyes now. They burned our camp, shot my brothers in their sleep. My mother died holding prayer beads the white priest gave her. She swallowed. My father, they hanged him from our council pole. Calder dropped his gaze. They found me in a hollow tree. I had a knife. They said it proved I was planning revenge. Her voice hardened. They beat me, dragged me, tied me to that tree, left me there. She paused. For who? Her voice dropped. For the rest of us. Whoever was left. Whoever still remembered. Then, silence. Software. Then. Why did you cut me down? Calder stared at the fire. Because once. He exhaled, rough. I didn't. She frowned, confused. My sister, he said, voice flat. Last spring, raiders hit our ranch. Apache, maybe, maybe not. I was out hunting, came back to smoke and screams. He clenched his fists. I heard her in the barn, crying. She was 16. But I didn't go in. I waited for help. He closed his eyes. She died before anyone came. Lena stared at him. You saved me because you couldn't save her. He nodded, just once. She studied his face. If I'd been white, would you still have pulled the knife? Calder rose, walked around the table, stood in front of her. She tilted her head up, searching. He gently cupped her chin, fingers rough but gentle. I don't love skin, he said. I love what breathes under it. Her eyes glistened, but no tears came. She leaned forward, pressing her cheek into his hand. And then, instinct, motion. They leaned in. The kiss was soft, unsure, but deep, like breathing for the first time. Her hands trembled on his chest. His arms circled her shoulders. The fire behind them hissed and popped, like it knew not to interrupt. Later, in the kitchen, only candlelight, their shadows moved across wooden walls like old dancers who had finally remembered the steps. Outside, the desert slept. Inside, something had begun to heal. But morning brought change. The wind carried sand and smoke. Calder felt it in his ribs, the kind of pressure that came before a storm. But not the kind with rain, the kind with boots. 3 days had passed since that kiss, since the words neither of them said had started building something fragile between them. Lena moved more freely now. She helped in the barn, fed the mule, even smiled once when Calder cursed it for biting his boot. But peace is thin out here. By noon, a trail of dust curled from the east. Calder stood at the fence, jaw tight, rifle in hand. 3 riders approached, locals, canvas coats, rusted rifles. Their leader wore a badge, more rust than shine, pinned to a stained vest. "Wyatt," the man called, dismounting. "Heard tell you might be keeping someone here that don't belong." Calder's voice was cool. "You hear a lot of things, Joe. Doesn't mean they're true." Joe Prescott spit into the dust. "Girl, Apache," the man spat. $50 in cash and the gratitude of every God-fearing soul west of the river. Calder didn't move. "You came all this way chasing smoke?" Prescott's eyes narrowed. "We plan to take a look inside, just in case." Calder stepped slowly off the porch. "You got a warrant?" Prescott scoffed. "You think this is a courtroom, Wyatt?" The 2 men beside him shifted in their saddles. Their fingers flirted with triggers. The heat between them wasn't just the sun. "I'm the only one lives here," Calder said, voice steady. "Ain't no girl, just ghosts and goats." Prescott stared at him for a beat too long, then gave a tight nod. "If you're lying, you'll burn with her." They rode off, not searching, not needing to. Their message hung in the air like smoke from a fire not yet lit. That night, Calder sat by the fire behind the barn. Stars hidden beneath thick cloud. In his hand, the wooden sign, the one he'd pulled from the roots of hate. "White man don't forgive." The paint was faded now, but the venom still lived in the letters. He stared. Then, without a word, he walked it to the fire pit. No speech, no ritual, just truth. He placed it gently among the kindling, struck a match, watched the flame kiss the edge, then climb. Orange, gold, smoke rising like a soul leaving. The wood cracked, curled, as if the hate inside fought to stay alive. Behind him, footsteps. Lena. She wore one of his old coats, too large for her small frame. The sleeves rolled at the cuffs. She said nothing, but stepped beside him. The fire reflected in her eyes. Not just grief, but something harder to name. Maybe mourning, maybe release. "I should have burned it sooner," Calder said. She didn't reply, only moved close enough for her shoulder to press against his. Her hands gripped the coat tight around her, fingers white from holding. "Thank you," she whispered. The words landed like prayer. Calder looked down at her, heart full and aching all at once. The fire dimmed to glowing embers, and for the first time since she'd been cut from that cursed tree, there was no trace of the hate that had marked her. Only warmth. Only what they had chosen instead. The next morning brought no wind, only stillness, thick, watchful. Calder rose before the sun, packed dry biscuits, salted meat, a canteen. The land around them didn't breathe right. It felt like waiting. He'd seen smoke on the horizon, too steady to be anything but signal. Time had run out. At the fence line, Lena waited, hair braided, the same coat wrapped around her like a memory. Her face was calm, but her eyes held storms. "We have to go," Calder said, cinching his saddle. "Tonight?" She nodded. She already knew. "There's land south," he went on. "Across the border. Some say the Apache live free in the Sierra Madres. No soldiers, no signs." He paused. "We can make it, if we ride hard." Lena stepped closer, so close he could see her breath in the morning chill. She reached for his hand, gripped it firm. "You'll come?" he asked, barely louder than a breath. She pressed her forehead to his chest, her voice steady, slow. like a vow. I want to live as your wife. Calder closed his eyes. That one sentence, more powerful than any oath he'd ever heard. He kissed the crown of her head, breathed her in like oxygen. By sundown, the horses were saddled. No fire, no letter, no goodbye. Just a door left swinging, just a home turned to silence. They rode under starlight. Moonlight bathed the desert in silver. Lena leaned into her horse, steady, practiced. She didn't ask what waited ahead. She simply followed. 10 miles from the border, the land flattened. Scrub brush, cliffs. Shadows stretched like warnings. Calder's gut tightened. Then, the shot. A crack like the sky breaking. Calder jerked, slid from his saddle, crashed into the dust. "Calder!" Lena screamed, already off her horse, rushing to him. He clutched his side. Blood bloomed dark beneath his shirt. "Go!" he gasped. "No!" Another bullet tore past, struck the rock behind them. 2 shadows on the ridge, rifles raised. Hunters. Calder groaned, pushing to his knees. "We have to move." Lena hooked her arm under his shoulder. "Believe me," he grunted, "I won't slow you." Together, barely, they staggered toward the rocks. Gunfire chased them. Every step was fire. Calder's breath came wet. The ground swam. Still, they moved. Found a narrow pass between 2 cliffs, hidden, steep. Lena dragged him inside, pressed him against cool stone. Her chest heaved. Sweat mingled with fear on her brow. Behind them, the shots faded. The riders wouldn't follow through the rocks. Too risky. Calder dropped to his knees, blood dripping onto the sand. He looked up at her, wonder and pain tangled in his gaze. "You said you wanted to be my wife." She knelt beside him, cupped his face. "I meant it." He smiled, even through the agony. "Then we better survive this pass." She nodded, and for the first time since they met, Lena prayed, not to crosses, not to cathedrals, but to fire, wind, and survival. Because love out here was always a bet, and tonight they'd wagered everything. The tent flap rustled. Moonlight slipped through the seams like silver veins. Outside, the river hummed. Crickets whispered. Inside, Calder lay still but breathing, propped on folded blankets, skin pale but color returning. Lena sat beside him, a basin at her knee, pressing a cool cloth to his brow. His eyes cracked open, lazy. "You always this bossy with your patience?" She smirked. "Only the ones too stubborn to die." He chuckled, then winced. The laugh pulled at the stitches. She hushed him, hand resting gently on his chest. The silence deepened, not awkward, but full. "Tell me something real," Calder murmured. "What's your name?" Lena looked down. Then, slowly, she took his hand, placed it over her heart. "Ayanna," she said. "It means peaceful river. My father gave it to me." Calder closed his eyes, let the name settle like a blessing. "Ayanna," he repeated, voice soft. "You're the only peace I've ever known." She didn't cry, just held his hand tighter. Seasons passed, south of the border, where mesquite trees whispered to the sky and wind smelled of sage and stone. A lodge stood by the river bend, humble, built of pine and hide, strong. Ayanna Salvatierra sat beneath the awning, cross-legged, stitching a tiny white shirt, her belly rounded beneath her sash. She hummed softly, needle passing through cloth with certainty. Inside, herbs hung in bundles. 2 books lay on a shelf, and a baby blanket waited, nearly done. Out in the yard, Calder trained a young Mustang, murmured commands. His eyes drifted back to the lodge, to her. Every time he saw her shadow move behind the curtain, he smiled. Ayanna moved through their home like breath, grounding. Quiet, present. That evening, she walked to the river, barefoot. The water moved slow, steady. She stepped into the shallows, let the current kiss her feet, placed her hands over her belly. "Little one," she whispered, "your father didn't just forgive. He loved. He kept his promise." Behind her, Soft steps. Calder came, said nothing, their fingers intertwined like roots. Together, they watched the water drift into the dusk, where stars blinked open like memories. No one would have expected them, fugitives marked and scarred, to find this. But somehow, in a world of ash and echoes, they carved out a piece of earth where love took root. Not the kind in history books, the kind that lives. And the river kept flowing, peaceful, like her name, like their life, like something finally, truly home.